Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reading a tweet that can give us some indication about the number of kills and overall casualties in the Ukraine war. And this is important for us because this will tell us if America or if Russia is lying about the casualty rates within this conflict. And so this is an American source. And the American source, the United States Army War College, published a summary of what will apparently be detailed papers on the lessons from Ukraine. Okay, so they're talking about this being directly lessons they learned from the Ukrainian situation. Summary. Okay, so I've highlighted below two striking passages. The TLDR, the U.S. is not remotely capable of large-scale combat operations, which is exactly what we expected. The United States has not had what can be considered large-scale combat operations probably since Vietnam, though you could also say not since really World War II, which is a long time ago at this point. So America has lost that expertise for large-scale conflicts. Things like Afghanistan, they really rolled over the Afghanistan fighters because the Afghanistan fighters just did not have the equipment of the United States. And in Iraq, they just destroyed the entire infrastructure so that even if they had a decently strong military, they didn't really have to compete with them directly. They just had to destroy the infrastructure, and then the military couldn't fight them on equal footing. However, again, something like a Russia or China, which has a very large industrial base and could compete with the United States directly, you have to be more concerned about whether you can take on that foe, considering you don't have experience with that type of war. And so Russia is gaining direct experience right now because they're fighting Ukraine, and Ukraine had the second largest or third largest, depending on how you look at it, military in Europe after the 2014 overthrow of the democratically elected government. NATO provided them a ton of funding, a ton of training, and they became the second or third largest military within Europe at that time. And so here we see just indications directly about what the United States thinks is going to occur if the United States went to war with, say, a Russia or China. So the casualties, replacements, and reconstruction here in the summary by the Army War College. The Russia-Ukraine war is exposing significant vulnerabilities in the Army's strategic personnel depth and ability to withstand and replace casualties. Army theater medical planners may anticipate a sustained rate of roughly 3,600 casualties per day. Okay, so I did the calculations for that, and that would lead to casualties that are over 2 million given the current length of the Russia-Ukraine war. And remember, casualties are injuries and kills. And so we have to figure out what is a good estimate for kills to injuries in a casualty rating. And it's usually about 1 to 3 to 1 to 5. And so for every one person killed, there are 3 injured, or up to 5 injured is a really good estimate. And so I did the calculations there. And in terms of the kill rate, that would mean that somewhere around 400,000 to 700,000 Ukrainians have died. And these are military personnel, have died since the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Okay. And so those numbers are far more in line with the Russian numbers of the Ukraine conflict than of the Ukrainian and Western numbers of the Ukraine conflict. So again, this is the United States telling us what we learned about war against a major competitor. Okay? And these are their own estimates of kill rates given the Ukrainian conflict. And so when they tell you, oh, Ukraine has under 100,000 deaths, one, that just doesn't make sense given the amount of troops they currently have, given the amount of troops they've conscripted. The numbers don't add up. You would have to have hundreds of thousands of people who have just simply disappeared from the military if they didn't die or weren't permanently wounded. And so this tells us that Russia has been extremely honest about how the war is going, whereas the West has not. And I think tell my viewers this all the time. You don't have to believe what I say. You don't have to believe what people like Gordon Chang or Peter Zion say either, who disagree with me on a lot of things. Or what's that guy's name? Elbridge Colby or something. You don't have to agree with their perspective. You don't have to agree with my perspective. What I tell you to do is look at what various organizations that have a stake in the game, what they're doing. And it seems clear to me, given how Latin America, how Africa, how various Asian powers, how they're acting towards Russia, it's clear to me that they believe Russia, they trust Russia, they understand the situation from Russia's perspective. And sure, you also have Western powers who are supporting the United States and Ukraine in this conflict, but you have to remember those Western powers have a vested interest in toppling Russia and of supporting Ukraine. They're not looking at this from a third-party perspective. They're looking at this as active participants on one side of this conflict. And so when you look at the third-party perspective of countries that have an intelligence apparatus and can collect their own information, it seems fairly obvious that you can confirm that Russia is being honest and Ukraine and the West are simply not. So that was the main point of this video, but there's a few other major tidbits I want to go over. So just remember that 400,000 to 700,000 Ukrainian deaths at this point. That's why they have to keep conscripting older people, younger people. They're conscripting not only men, but also women now. That is because of the fact that they have lost actual deaths, 400,000 to 700,000. So ranging from those killed in action to those wounded in action or suffering disease or other non-battle injuries. So yeah, like I said, I did the estimations given prior wars. What are the non-kills to kills when it comes to casualties? A lot of people think when they think casualties, they think that means the person died. No, that means that they're just taken out of action. With a 25% predicted replacement rate, the personnel system will require 800 new personnel each day. For context, the United States sustained about 50,000 casualties in 2 decades of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. In large-scale combat operations, the United States could experience that same number of casualties in 2 weeks. Okay? This is not talking about using nuclear weapons or anything like that. This is simply combat on the battlefield. They can lose the same amount of troops in 2 weeks as they lost in 2 decades in Iraq and Afghanistan. The United States is very clearly not prepared for a war with a peer or near-peer competitor, some country that has a decent manufacturing base. In addition to the disciplined disobedience required to execute effective mission commands, the United States Army is facing a dire combination of recruiting shortfall and a shrinking individual ready reserve. This recruiting shortfall, nearly 50% in the combat arms career management fields, is a longitudinal problem. Every infantry and armor soldier we do not recruit today is a strategic mobilization asset we will not have in 2031. Okay, so I don't know why they're using the 2031 in particular here, but it does tell you that the United States is preparing for war with a peer or near-peer competitor, and they're falling far short. You see people who have a military background and they're telling their family members, just do not join the military. The military is not for you anymore. They don't care about you. They don't support you. They will get you killed for banker wars. They'll get you killed for vested interest groups, for the politicians, but not for actually protecting the homeland. Because we see that America is not interested in protecting its actual citizens whatsoever. They don't care about their people. In fact, in quite a few cases, they actually actively hate their own people. And so, yeah, it's no wonder that they're having a recruiting shortfall at this point in time. And there's really, I don't think, any way of coming back from this, because they're... how much detail do I want to go into this? Their current perspective is actively hostile to the people who would be most conducive for being recruited into the military. And that's all I'll say on the matter there. Also, the individual ready reserve, which stood at 700,000 in 1973 and 450,000 in 1994, now stands at 76,000. So again, the population in America is increasing, but the actual people who are even qualified to join the military has actually been decreasing. So the controlled drones that can drone strike people from afar, that cannot come soon enough for the United States military, because a lot of people in America are not physically fit enough to actually serve in the military right now. These numbers cannot fill the existing gaps in the active force, let alone say casualty replacement or expansion during a large-scale combat operation. The implication is that the 1970s concept of an all-volunteer force has outlived its shelf life and does not align with the current operating environment. So I'm an American in my 30s living outside the United States, so I don't have to worry about this. But if you are an American living within the United States and you're of conscription age, it's very unfortunate for you, but you are likely to be conscripted for the upcoming war with China, which I personally believe is going to occur. And you don't have to take my word for it again. Look at how China is reacting to the United States at this point. And it seems pretty clear to me that they view the United States as wanting a war at all costs, because they've given up on direct diplomacy with the United States to a very large extent, because they don't see the point to it anymore, because the United States, no matter what, is not going to hold to its agreements, and it's not going to stop its push for war, its march for war. The technological revolution described below suggests this force has reached obsolescence. Okay, so they're saying that you just can't have an all-volunteer force because, one, no one wants to join, and of the people who may want to join, very few are actually physically fit enough to join the military. Large-scale combat operations, troop requirements may well require a reconceptualization of the 1970s and 1980s volunteer force and a move towards partial conscription. So this is not some random person saying this. These are excerpts from the Army War College. Yeah, this is a comment responding. So, okay, that is what I wanted to go over in this video. So a lot of scary things going on here. One is just sadness at the Ukrainian conflict that didn't have to happen. The United States very clearly fomented that conflict. The Maidan coup in 2014, that just didn't have to happen. They had snipers on the roofs of the protester-led buildings, controlled buildings, and they killed people from both sides, and then they took over the government from the democratically elected government. And they're saying it's because, well, the leader who was democratically elected did not go along with what he said he was going to do. Well, every leader in Western history pretty much has not done what they said they would do during the election season. So that's a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, Zelensky, the current leader of Ukraine, was a peace candidate, and now look at what's happening. 400 to 700,000 Ukrainian men dead that did not need to be dead. That's a country that just, in pretty much every way, shape, or form, is not going to be existing. Sure, Russia does not want to claim all of the land. I do think that they're going to claim Kharkiv, however you pronounce that, and Odessa before the end of this conflict, but they're not going to take Western Ukraine. They're going to leave that probably for Poland and places like Hungary and things like that to fight over. So it's a tragic state of affairs. The Ukrainian people did not really understand. They thought that if they joined the Western camp, they would be better off. But if you look at things, actually, people's standard of living declined after the 2014 Maidan coup in Ukraine. Things just got worse and worse and worse there. Just a ton of things wrong. So just sadness about that. And then concern later on for my fellow Americans who, yes, I'm very critical about the American government, but I actually do care about the Americans. That's actually why I'm critical of the American government, because I don't think the American government works for the people in America anymore. And I don't know if it ever did. I've tried to find times when it did, and it just does not seem like the American government actually ever cared about its people. But I'm here to defend not only the American people, but the people of the rest of the world who are innocent, who are trying to live their lives, and the American government is hostile towards them. It's causing problems for them, and you see that here. And so hopefully you learn something about that, and hopefully I do hope it actually raised your concerns about being conscripted if you are a military-age man in the Western world right now, because that seems to be the direction that things will be going in, because the United States is just not able to get countries like India to volunteer themselves to die fighting China. So they're gonna do their best to recruit you, and if they can't recruit you, they're just gonna draft you. So that is the state of affairs. If you found this video to be helpful, then please give us a thumbs up. It helps us in the algorithm. And if you want to see more content from me, please subscribe. We have daily content coming out, and I've gone into kind of a rhythm here, so I actually very much like making daily content. And leave us a comment. I like engaging with everyone. I like the comments, even the negative ones are just kind of funny for me. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate you sticking with us. So thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.